you are not so Great Britain.
Chapter 1. The NHS is the envy of the whole world. Or is it? Hello everyone. My name is Tomasz and I'm here with Elisę. Hi Elisę.
Hello.
We are taking to you as a podcast entitled You Are Not So Great Britain. In this podcast, we want to show the things in Britain that can be improved in hope that Britain can actually help itself to get better, because at the moment it is in a troubled situation. And for our first topic, we decided to speak about the NHS.
Yeah. Beloved NHS, which, however, is not very beloved by the foreigner citizens living in the UK.
Which is actually quite funny, because if you read British social media or if you listen to Britons, the NHS here is almost like a religion. You cannot criticize it. There's this widespread belief that this is the best system in the world, that the whole world envies the NHS. People are talking something about like people of Europe coming here to use the superior NHS services. Well, in fact, the truth is quite opposite.
Yeah.
People who live here, they travel abroad to get their health service. Even Britons themselves, they go to Bulgaria or to Poland to get their dentist treatment. And there must be reason why it is happening. And the reason is that the fact is the NHS is not that great.
I was actually thinking about how when I was living in the UK and I first started noticing the adoration that the locals had for the NHS, I found it quite kind of funny because I'm from Italy, and you can say that the Italian healthcare system is pretty good. I mean, I think it ranks as one of the best in the world, and it has its problems, but it is overall pretty good. But we Italians are absolutely merciless towards our healthcare system. We criticize it all the time. We complain all the time. And then I noticed how in the UK, it's exactly the opposite. The healthcare system is probably worse than the Italian one, in my experience, and also according to several other people I spoke to. But nobody can say any kind of criticism about the NHS, and that's from my point of view as an Italian, that is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's a similar story in Poland. Actually, a Polish health system is in like perpetual state of emergency. All the governments are always trying to fix it, and in most cases they just make things worse. So it like hangs on the thread, but still on like the human level, I think you can have better care from the Polish health system. Of course, sometimes it's hard, the hospitals are understaffed and the services are limited, and sometimes you have to have some long waits. But actually, Poles are criticizing, and they are constantly complaining about this long waiting times to see a specialist or something.
Yeah.
But if you looked closer, actually it turns out that in Poland, the waiting times are often much shorter than in Britain. Just to give you one example, a couple of years back, I needed an urgent neurology consultation. And my British GP openly told me, just go to Poland. There's no chance you will have it here anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I went to Poland to get a private consultation. And the doctor told me if I came to him on like equivalent of the Polish NHS, I would have to wait 6 weeks for it. And in Britain, I finally got my NHS consultation after 50 weeks,
Wow.
which gives you some idea how bad it is here.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, the waiting period to get specialist consultations in Italy are also pretty long. I think they are getting longer and longer everywhere, pretty much. But I remember, for example, I come from Tuscany, and I read on a local newspaper about an English tourist that was on a holiday here, And I don't remember exactly what it was, but she had to have some emergency medical intervention. It was really urgent. It could go really bad. And she was absolutely stunned. She spoke to the journalist and she thanked medical staff at the local hospital because she said that it was a very quick intervention, very competent doctors, and also they just were so nice to her and so soothing and reassuring, which she said that was something completely new for her, because she said that in the UK the waiting period would probably be longer. She would probably be invited to go back to her country of origin to get treated. And she also said that doctors in the UK tend to be a bit more, how can I say, okay, I fixed you up, now go, get out. And that's something I actually experienced myself.
Yeah, I had that as well. When I finally got to this neurologist, I was asked, what do you want if I feel better already? Well, I feel better already because I was cured by those Polish doctors for last year. They were dealing with me. But, coming back to this English tourist in Tuscany, tell me the most important thing. Did she got a paracetamol from the Italian doctor?
She didn't say, so I'm just assuming that she didn't. But yeah.
Yeah, so she got a proper healthcare instead.
Yes, I
guess.
think so. But yeah, I to be honest, before I lived in the UK, I remember I had a friend who already lived there, and she told me, "Oh, the healthcare in the UK is so bad." She kept fainting every day, and she didn't understand what was wrong with her. She kept pestering her doctor to get more, specialistic care, and all she got every time was go home, take paracetamol and rest. And I thought that she was exaggerating. But then I went to the UK and I lived pretty much exactly the same thing. Every time I went to the doctor with a problem, I was sent back with paracetamol. I really thought that this was just, an urban legend or a joke, but it's not.
Yeah, I used to work as an interpreter, mostly for the police, but sometimes I was also helping Polish people to get like social service or health service. And I remember this client of mine who was a lorry driver in his 50s, and he got some long-going cardiac issues. And he felt some pain in the chest. So he wanted to go to the doctor as a responsible driver of 36-ton lorry and ask the doctor if it's safe for him to drive if he got this chest pains and he had some heart attack in the past or something. So he was quite concerned. And that was like almost 15 years ago now. So it was still a lot of paperwork involved. And he went to this doctor and he got like this very thick file of the medical documentation. Some of it was from Poland, but in Polish health service, like all the documentation is in Latin, so the doctors in other countries should be able to read it. Some of that was in English. And he went to this doctor and he told him all his story. I was, of course, interpreting. And then the doctor started to browse this documentation of him, and he like mumbling something under breath and looking at him and then looking in this documentation again and then clicking something in the computer. And finally he got up on his chair, rested his back and said, okay, you know what we'll do? You'll go home and you'll take paracetamol and we'll see how it goes. You come back to me in 3 weeks. And this guy went ballistic and said, I cannot take paracetamol because I take this medicines. And he started to browse all this documentation, and he pulled one sheet and just basically threw that on this doctor. Look, this says I cannot take paracetamol with this other medicine I'm taking. And this doctor said, oh, yeah, I see. That's a good thing you pointed it to me. And he started to browse this documentation again, and mumbling something under his breath again, then looked in the computer, clicked something, said, check the paperwork again. And finally, he got up and said, okay, so you know what we'll do? You go home, you don't take paracetamol, and we see how it goes, and you come back in 3 weeks. Yeah. And before we left the surgery, this client asked me if I can help him to book the a plane ticket to Poland because he lost all the trust in the British health service at this moment. And a funny thing is that when I mentioned paracetamol to you, you laughed instantly.
Yes.
Because it's such a obvious, it's almost like a meme for Europeans living in Britain.
Absolutely.
We are like laughing at this paracetamol being like panaceum to everything for British doctors.
Yeah.
And I recently discovered that while Polish community in Scotland, they have this saying like, I'm going to a doctor. And then they ask, are you going to a real doctor? Which mean like Eastern European doctor, or you are going to Poland to see the doctor there, or you are going to Dr. Paracetamol, which means like a British doctor. And I recently discovered that a Balkan community, Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks living in Britain, they have exactly the same meme without knowing that it's the same in Polish as well. So they divide doctors for proper doctors and Dr. Paracetamol, which means British doctor. I think that says something.
Yeah. No, but it is a meme. It really is. Like if you browse any Facebook group, like Italians in London, Italians wherever in the UK, whenever the subject of medical care and doctors come up, there will always be someone making a joke about paracetamol, like, oh, did you get paracetamol and told to stay home and rest? Because it happens so often. And yeah, it just seems like, I don't know, my first doctor, my first GP when I was living in the UK, I was so shocked the first time I went there because I basically needed to get a prescription for the anticonceptional I was using at the time. And he seemed thoroughly confused by what I was asking. And he started looking up the product and information on Google. And that really, okay, I could have done that myself. So yeah, I in general had a very puzzling experience with GPs in the UK.
Yeah, and I also have to notice that this is not only with GPs, because I had been misfortunate to need like a proper care twice. First time it was back in 2008 when I had a car accident. I was rear-ended by some driver and I was in pain. I had some spinal problems which are still bothering me from time to time today. And I went to the hospital for accident and emergency. I was like unable to walk, like a taxi driver almost like carried me in, and I was given ibuprofen and was sent home. And I was still in pain, so I went to my GP a few days later and they also wanted to give me paracetamol. I was so annoyed that I told him, listen, if I wanted paracetamol I would go to gas station, it's much closer to my place than your surgery. And only after that I got a proper care. And a decade later I again had some injury. I had a head injury after being assaulted, and I ended up in accident and emergency after blacking out and almost crashing my van. And again, this junior doctor just snapped my her fingers around my head, asked me to follow her finger with my eyes, and then she said, oh, you'll be okay in 2 weeks, just go home, take paracetamol, blah blah blah. And I went home and I was terrible and it was a disaster. And I went to my GP and she said to me, no, you definitely need like a MRI scan. There's something wrong. You have to go again to accident and emergency and ask that. And I went there 3 weeks after my injury. And I said, listen, 3 weeks ago, you said I'll be okay in 2 weeks. I'm much worse now. I'm in constant pain. I cannot like stand up. I have balance issues. I have sleeping issues. I have problems with lights and everything. And they did again. They snapped fingers. They asked me to follow the fingers. They told me to stand up, and they said, no, you don't need an MRI. You'll be okay in 2 weeks. I've been on sick leave for almost a year because of this head injury. And yet I've been to hospital twice, and on both occasions they told me I'll be okay in 2 weeks. And it ended up, as I mentioned already, that my GP here said, he was pretty straightforward meaning. I said like, there's no chance you will get a proper care here. You need a proper care. If you cannot afford to go privately, fly to Poland. You should be okay to be on the plane and get your help there. I went to Poland. I got my MRI. I got my neurology consultation. I got my psychiatric consultation because of a long story. I had like some injury caused depressions and insomnia and everything. And actually the whole treatment of mine was that my doctors in Poland were like prescribing me drugs. And then I was getting that email from them to my Scottish GP, and he was just double checking that, like against some Scottish rules, I guess, and then was saying that it's okay. So he was basically rubber stamping decisions of my Polish specialist doctors, and that's how I got back on my legs. And this is the problem, that we hear so much about the superior accident emergency help, and probably if you like being mauled in the car accident and then you are airlifted to the hospital on the helicopter and you land there and you get to the operating theater, you will get really good help. But to reach that help, unless you are going from this really accident and emergency path, it's really hard to get through this guardian of the health service who is just trying to scare you off by giving you paracetamol and telling you to go home.
Yeah, and also there doesn't really seem to be a culture of prevention. So you were complaining about problems with balance and such. You almost crashed your car and you had been assaulted. Like in Italy, I think they wouldn't even question that you need an MRI scan. But in the UK, it seems like, oh, let's just see how it goes. And if it gets worse, we'll do something about it. Why do you have to let it go worse first? Why can't we check what's going on so that maybe we can prevent it from getting worse? I don't get that.
And, I have this comparison to Poland because I had this car accident in 2008. I had been assaulted in 2018. But I also had a car accident in 1999 when I still lived in Poland. And after this accident, I still drove the car. It was still drivable. So I drove it to my parents' place, which was nearby the accident place. And then I got off the car and I collapsed. I lost conscience for a second.
Wow.
So my dad put me into his car and he rushed me to the hospital. And it was 1990s in Poland. This hospital looked like they could shoot Chernobyl in there, because that's how it looked. It was awful. And they were wheeling me around on this wheelchair, which has a punctured tire. It was that bad. And yet within 4 hours since I was in this hospital, I had an X-ray of my skull, which was really nice. And I still have it somewhere, the classic analog X-ray with this big plastic, I don't know how it's called in English, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've been seen by a neurologist, I've been seen by a surgeon, I've been seen by first of all, by this accident and emergency doctor on duty. So after that, I've been x-rayed, I've been seen by 2 specialists, and I've been kept in a hospital overnight just to be sure I'll be okay. And we only released the next day after that. And that was in Poland in the worst times, when we were still a long way before we joined the European Union, when the health system was so underfunded. And yet I was given much more care and attention than I've been given with this allegedly superior NHS in the middle of 21st century.
Yeah, an example from a friend of mine. She has lots of spots on her skin. So she has to keep them, under control. She has to get them checked quite regularly in case she, might develop skin cancer. She lots of moles. That was the word I was looking for. She has lots of moles. So she went to her GP to ask for, just a periodical check. And so at first her GP said, oh, have you been experiencing any kind of discomfort? Have you noticed if any have changed shape or have become bigger? No, I just want to get them checked because I do periodically get them checked. But why? There's no reason why. And in the end, she insisted. And in the end, she managed to get a routine check. And the so-called dermatologist literally just turned her around, looking at her without any kind of, tool, just looked at her. And she said, yeah, everything looks fine. You're good to go. And in the end, she just got on a plane and went to Italy to get her moles checked. And also same thing with another friend. She had a problem with her eye, and the doctor refused to give her any kind of antibiotic because basically it was an infection and she was worried that it might develop into something worse. Her GP from Italy she had been in contact with him, and she had advised that she gets antibiotics, but her GP wouldn't give her antibiotics. And in the end, it got so much worse that she indeed had to get an operation, a needless operation that could have been avoided if she had been given antibiotics to begin with.
The other thing is that it is really hard to even get to a GP now. They switched to this telephone consultations where COVID started, and they still keep it. And somehow the waiting times are really long. And to be frank, I no longer even bother trying to get to the Scottish GP, because if I feel bad and they offer me a telephone consultation in 2 weeks, well, I can have telephone consultation with someone in Poland in 2 hours.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Yeah, that's also another thing. When I was still living in the UK and I wanted to try and getting in touch with my GP, I had to start calling from very early in the morning, but the waiting time was so long that sometimes I ended up, you could call for a consultation or to book an appointment from 8 to 9 a.m. every morning, say, and the waiting time sometimes was so long that I ended up waiting until after 9. And when I finally got in touch with someone, they said, "Oh, it's too late. You have to call again tomorrow." But I tried.
But let's wonder, how is that Britons still believe that the system is the best? I think we have to be fair here. When it started, the NHS, when it was introduced this decades and decades ago, it was a revolutionary concept about like free health service for everyone, easily accessible and stuff. And yes, that was a great concept, but it is, I think, like with many things in Britain, that it used to be great and people still like hold on to this former greatness because they cannot admit it's crumbling and falling apart. And I think this is the reason why they do it. A second reason why they still believe it, I think, is that they like to compare themselves not to Europe, but to the US. And of course, comparing to the American health service, every health service is brilliant.
Yeah, that's
so
what
it's
I was
hardly an
going to
achievement.
say. That I also have the feeling that sometimes it's not just nationalistic people that are so proud of the NHS. It's also normal people that are not, overly nationalistic or anything like that. But I have a feeling that they think that if you criticize the NHS, that might possibly give way for more privatization, because it's like admitting it's not working. So if the NHS doesn't work, we might as well privatize everything, and then you pay and get a good service in exchange for money. That's a feeling I have.
Yeah, there's also this thing that I can let you out a secret. I was writing for a certain British portal, and we were talking about doing some similar series to this podcast. Actually, that's how the podcast idea came to me. And they said, no, you'll be free to criticize because we need this outside view and everything. And said, okay, so the first chapter will be NHS. I said, no, you cannot do that. You cannot criticize NHS. I said, well, you said you can. I can criticize, but not the NHS. Just pick the other subjects. So I was like, no.
Yeah,
if I cannot criticize, if you pick what I can criticize, then I'm not doing that for you, because I want to be free to point the things that are wrong, because you need to fix the things that are wrong, not to fix the things that you are ready to admit they are wrong, because that won't get you very far.
Absolutely.
And there was the same argument you mentioned. Oh, we cannot attack the NHS because they will try to privatize it. But in my opinion, this is a wrong approach, because if you defend the existing collapsing system, it will only crumble further.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you want to save it, you have to fix it.
Yeah.
And this is the time to fix it. That's the last moment to fix it. Otherwise, it will really be privatized and it will be a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, it's already being privatized anyway. And, by just letting it happen, it won't fix anything. It will only get worse. And also, yeah, one thing that I believe that some people don't understand is that when I criticize the NHS, I'm not criticizing the concept, the idea. The concept is great. And I am sure there's plenty of very competent medical staff in the UK that do their best with whatever resources they have, which is not a lot.
And let's remember, they are paid rubbish money,
Yeah.
and they are just receiving claps on Thursday evenings during COVID, and that's all the recognition they are having.
So just letting this happen without saying anything, we're not doing any favor to the NHS or the people that work in it.
Yeah, it needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed soon if we want to save it. And it's really a great concept, as you said, and it's really worth saving.
Yeah.
That's why we should to do our best to recognize the issues it has and fix them while we still have time.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree. And but yeah, when I was in the UK and whenever I had issues with medical care there, I would only talk about it and complain about it to other foreigners, but I did not dare doing that in front of English people, because the 1 or 2 times I did that, they gave me a look that made me feel really uncomfortable, and I never repeated that mistake again. But it's silly, really. I'm not saying that, the NHS is rubbish and that we should go for a privatized system like in America. That's exactly what I don't want to happen.
Exactly. And that's what's in a way happening in Poland as well. And it's just a way to disaster.
Yeah.
So no, stick to your state-owned NHS and fix it so it works great and we can really call it great. And to end on a positive note, I think there are already some positive changes. For example, back in 2008, when I had this car accident, I was offered an acupuncture, which of course is rubbish and it's not a proper medical procedure. And I haven't been offered acupuncture this time, which I find to be a positive thing, because of the two things. I would rather get a paracetamol than acupuncture. I've also noticed that the homeopathic hospital in Glasgow is no longer a thing, and it was a thing a decade ago. So the fringes are already getting sorted, but the core of it still needs to be sorted.
Yeah.
But to end on a positive note, let's try to say something positive about the NHS. So apart from this tongue-in-cheek comments about homeopathy and acupuncture, what I love about it, it's that at least in Scotland, you got free prescriptions. That means you don't have to pay, which makes it much more accessible to people on low incomes, which is so important right now. What would be the positive thing you can say about the NHS?
Well, I'm thinking of a specific episode when I had to go to the emergency room when I was still living in the UK, and I was, bracing myself and preparing to have a terrible experience, because, I had that before whenever I had to go to the hospital. But I found this really, really nice doctor who was so just calming and soothing and just overall nice and friendly. And also for once, I felt really listened by her. And she immediately gave me antibiotics, which I'm not saying that, whenever somebody complains of an illness, you should give them antibiotics, but you shouldn't be, you should be allowed to get proper treatment if that's what you need. And this doctor did listen to me, did take me seriously, and gave me antibiotics when I needed them. And so that was actually a really pleasant experience. My problem was quickly resolved, and I remember I had been to the hospital, so it should have been, it's never fun to go to the hospital, but I left the hospital that night in such a good mood, and that made such a huge difference. So yeah, I'd like to thank that doctor whose name I can't remember, but I just want her to know, if she's somewhere out there, that she really made my day that day.
Yeah, because I think that's a good note to end, because we have to remember that while system may need to be fixed, the people who are working in that may be the greatest doctors, greatest nurses, and fantastic people, but they are still working in constraints of this system. So if we fix it, then probably they will be able to spread their wings and provide even better service.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which we would all want very much, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
Okay then, so thank you for that.
Thank you. That was a nice chat.
Yes, so I hope we won't be murdered on social media for criticizing the cherished NHS.
Yeah.
And I hope you like that and you will listen to our next episode next week. My name is Tomasz.
My name is Elisę.
And you are listening to Your Not So Great Britain.